Folks, I hope you're having a great Saturday. I know I am. Welcome back to another episode of Bullet Point 716. I am Rob Ryan, and I'm pleased to welcome back Mr. Michael Bunt. Mike, how are we
Hey,
doing
thanks for
today?
having me, man.
How are we doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be back with Trainwreck. It's been a long time coming, and boy, do we have some stuff to talk about this UB basketball program. A lot has changed in the year and a half since I've been part of Trainwreck Sports.
That is for sure. That is for sure. But so, as you mentioned, state of UB athletics is not where we expected it to be just a few years ago. What do you think? What's going on with them?
Well, we could have these long series about football, men's basketball, and women's basketball, but for this show, we're going to stick with the basketball program. It's tough, man. It's obviously a rebuilding period for this program. Expectations are the lowest they've been in over a decade for this school. And it's one of those things where you're hoping to see progress on a game by game basis while knowing that ultimately it's most likely not going to come together this season. It's about finding little things to attach hope to and hoping that by the end of the year, you can see a foundation being developed with these younger guys on the roster that you can add to through recruiting, the transfer portal, high schools, players, and so forth. But right now, it's a tough spot because they've had the Whitesell years. Obviously, there's been regression, and with this clean slate that Halkovich has right now, he's just not in a position to have this team winning at a high level at the current moment.
Yeah, I agree. This year is definitely a year where it's just determine what type of team you want to be and how you want to go the future, because this team is not built for success. But you always want some success, especially in your first year. You want to have a building step for the future. So, what do you think needs to change in the next few weeks, especially heading into MAC play, for this team to have at least some success? Maybe not success that we all want as UB fans, but just something that we can be like, all right, maybe we found our guy for the future and whatnot.
So there's two ways of answering this question. What needs to change for this team this year, and then what needs to change for this program to be successful long term? So for this team, it's about finding an identity. Right now, they're struggling with their guard play. They average more turnovers per game than assists. I think it's around 11 assists per game, 17 turnovers. They do not take care of the ball. As a team, they're shooting around 27% from behind the arc, which is not a good percentage at all. So they're a poor shooting team that is clumsy with the ball. Defensively, according to Ken Palm, they are around that 320 to 325 mark, which isn't getting it done. But hopefully when they get into MAC play, when they're playing some of these lower caliber teams, they can end up making up for it and getting some wins. Long term, what do they need to do to get back on track and find a way to start winning again? They need to start recruiting at a higher level. They need to start utilizing NIL, and they have to find a way to take advantage of the transfer portal. Right now, all these top mid-major and Power 5 programs, they are capitalizing big time on the transfer portal. It's basically the days of recruiting guys to be on in your program for 4 years are non-existent. If you're playing young players, you're going up against teams with experienced players. By the time you develop your young players, they're going to go into the portal because they don't like where your program is at anyway at that point, or they want to move on up. So it's going to be critical. Get an NIL collective in place. Start finding a way to bring in higher caliber recruits to this program, the type of guys that they were bringing in under Oates and Hurley, and find a way to try to play a more aggressive, fun, up-tempo style of basketball, because right now they don't have the athletes, and in this rebuilding phase, they're just outmanned on a nightly basis.
Yeah, now speaking of the NIL, as we've all known, a lot of UB fans know that Buffalo in general is very lacking compared to, like, as you mentioned, other MAC schools. We all know your lovely Ohio recently just got a big donation for NIL. Do you think there is a chance that NIL could start becoming a thing, especially with the SUNY schools?
It has to, Rob. If it doesn't, this program is not serious about winning. If they don't have one already, which I know there's always talk, like, do they have one? Is it serious? There's speculation that it wasn't really that significant based on the coaching search that was going on last spring. But you need NIL even at the mid-major level to be successful in college sports at this point in time. And if they don't, they're not going to be able to keep up with the Ohio's, the Toledo's. Even Akron and Kent State are able to bring in high caliber athletes, even if they don't have necessarily the NILs that maybe some of their MAC peers have. But it's going to be crucial going forward, because right now the transfer portal is essentially free agency. These players, they don't care about playing for the big time programs or the historic traditional schools anymore. They want to go to the program that's going to make them the best offer. I have examples from Ohio University this year where there was a guy that chose Ohio, got a transfer from Maryland to Ike Cornish, and then they got a transfer from Creighton, Sharif Mitchell. They were looking to get another guy, Miles Foster. He ended up choosing Illinois State. There was a guy that went to Western Michigan where NIL was factored into their decisions. Ohio's head coach simply said during an offseason event that big men in the portal were too expensive to bring to Ohio. They were out of the budget. You have head coaches openly talking to boosters about how NIL is determining where these players are going. So if UB doesn't have a system in place, it's going to cost them.
Yeah, I totally agree. We even see in football, I'm not going to go to that, but football, there's things that are the good QBs. I think it was, I forgot who it was, but he was saying even good QBs are going for $1 million, $2 million. That's something UB is never going to get into. But moving on to today's matchup, we got a big matchup for UB men's hoops versus Western Kentucky. Starting up almost about a little over 16 minutes away on ESPN Plus. What are you looking forward to today into today's game?
Yeah, so this Western Kentucky team is a good, not great squad. They already lost to Canisius earlier this year on a neutral court. And Canisius is good. Honestly, Canisius is probably much better than UB at the current moment, which is kind of sad to say, but it's a fact. And Canisius played a tight game with Western Kentucky and eventually kind of took control of the contest in the second half. So this is not a Western Kentucky team that you should expect to dominate today. The line was 7.5 in favor of them last I checked. This is a game where theoretically UB should remain competitive, and maybe if they bring their A game, even have a chance for an upset. But it's really hard to have a ton of confidence in the Bulls at this current moment, just because we don't see that game-to-game consistency. I've been encouraged by a few of their recent games. I thought they played a little bit better against Butler. There were spurts against St. Bonaventure that looked all right. And even James Madison wasn't horrendous considering the competition. So there are a few encouraging things, but right now with their youth mixed in with some of just their lack of continuity and cohesiveness as a unit, and even Isaiah Adams missing time, it's really hard to say, well, they need to do this better or they need to do that better, because the fact is they have to do almost everything on the court better. They need to have better ball movement. They need to improve their shooting overall. They need to improve defensively. This has been one of the worst defensive teams in Division I basketball this year. More so, I'm just hoping that game by game, I start to see slight improvements in each of those categories to where hopefully by the time we get to conference play, we see a squad that can battle for one of the last few spots in Cleveland, because this is not a top 6 team in the conference right now, but there's still an outside chance if they can figure things out, maybe they can compete for the 7 or the 8 spot and sneak into Cleveland at the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. We saw what happened with Coach Burke's team last year. They were definitely ravaged by the transfer portal and the departure of FLJ. But we saw a team that maybe had a rough start to the season, but once conference play started, they were gelling as a team and they made a run, and they even almost upset the number one team in Bowling Green last season. So you never know what could happen when MAC play starts. That's why we love MACtion. But for today's game, I know you mentioned a little bit, but where do you think this one goes?
So I'm a big Ken Palm person. It's my go-to whenever I'm making predictions and stuff like that. Right now, Ken Palm gives UB only a 26% chance of winning today, and they predict the final score to be 78-71. That kind of lines up with what the Vegas line is at 7.5. I think UB can remain competitive today. I will pick Western Kentucky because, like, let's be real, they're the better team on paper. I'll say 80-70. WKU would be my prediction, but it's in Buffalo. This is a game that maybe UB can surprise some people, stay competitive, and like I said, if they can keep it close going into the final 5 minutes of the second half, maybe they can pull out some magic and get a W.
Yeah, I agree. I was typically the one in the past that no matter what, I'd go with UB, but there's just nothing as of right now with a 1 in 10 team.
1-8, one and
1 in
eight.
8, not
Hey,
as
there's a
bad. Not
Niagara game coming up soon. Maybe they can
maybe
win
we'll
that
get
one.
that second win. But yeah, I'm going with WKU, and I'm going with a final score of 82-75. I'm hoping they stay a little close, as you mentioned. In the last few games, they have been keeping it close for a little better competition. I'm just hoping for signs of improvement, and we'll just see. We're almost a little over 10 minutes away from the game. Do you have anything else to add before we sign off?
Yeah, just that, like, it's frustrating that UB is in this spot right now. All I mean, when I first joined Bullet Points years ago, we were talking about a team that was coming off a top 25 season that had back-to-back NCAA tournament wins and made the tournament 4 out of 5 years. And it was a slow regression over time. The first three White Sox seasons, in comparison to now, were actually good days. They were teams that were near the top 100 in Ken Palm. And if you compared them to most MAC programs, we're still decently successful. But there was signs that were showing at that point in time that they were starting to regress. The recruiting was starting to tail off. They were losing to lower caliber competition. There was concerns that it wasn't going to be sustainable, and that once they lost the Oates recruits, once they lost the Javon Graves, the Devontae Jordans, the Janathan Williams, and the Rondo Segu's, that they weren't going to be as competitive. And we saw it in White Sox final season last year, where they had a below 500 record. Then you bring in a new coach, and you lose more players to transfers and Curtis Jones. You have an approach focused on recruiting youth. It's not a surprise that this is where they are right now. The more surprising thing is that they have fallen as low as they have fallen. I could have told you that UB was probably only going to win 10 to 12 games before the season, but I didn't think that they would be a bottom 50 team in college basketball, which seems like a dramatic fall. So my final thoughts are this: Halkovich has a tremendous challenge in front of him. The momentum from the Hurley Oates days are gone, but this is still a program that has respect at the mid-major level. If UB can find a way to start raising some NIL funds for a collective, if they can aggressively start pursuing the transfer portal, and if he ends up being the coach that some people believe he can be, this is not going to be the new standard. There's still potential and growth opportunity for this program to become a top 100 team in a few years from now. So let's be patient and hope that they can eventually turn things around. And last thing I'll say, I'm just happy to be back with you, Rob, with the Trainwreck team, with Bullet Points. And I embrace this challenge the next year or two of discussing UB athletics and basically discussing what they need to do to get back on the right track.
And I couldn't agree more. And with that, I'm Rob Ryan. Thanks for joining us and welcome back to the team, Mike. And with that, there's only 3 words. Let's go Bulls.